The smell of motor oil never really leaves a place. Even standing in the hospital parking lot at 7 inches the morning, I could still smell it on my jacket, the one they'd bagged up with the rest of my things when the paramedics brought me in 11 days earlier. That smell meant my father. It meant Saturday mornings under a truck chassis with grease on my knuckles and a man beside me who never needed to say he loved me because every callus on his hands already said it. My name is Caleb Merritt. I'm 32. I spent most of my life working beside my father in the shop he built from nothing, Merritt Sons Auto Fabrication, a two-bay garage on the edge of Clarkston, Ohio that had been in our family for 27 years. 2 weeks before I ended up in the hospital, my father died. Massive stroke. He was 61. And while I was lying in a bed with a fractured wrist, 3 cracked ribs, and a bruised kidney from a car accident I don't even fully remember, something happened to the shop that would change everything I thought I knew about my own family. I didn't find out right away. I found out the way you find out things that were never meant for you to discover by accident, in the worst possible moment, when the world was already quiet enough for the truth to echo. My brother drove me home from the hospital. He was cheerful in a way that felt slightly too deliberate, talking about football and the road construction on Route 14 and whether I wanted to stop for breakfast. I sat in the passenger seat with my arm in a sling, watching the flat Ohio landscape slide past the window, not really listening. I was thinking about my father. About the last conversation we'd had, which was unremarkable, something about a customer's timing belt, and how I'd give anything to have one more of those unremarkable conversations. My brother kept talking. I kept not listening. When we pulled into the driveway of his house where I'd been staying since my apartment lease ended 2 months earlier, his wife came out onto the porch. She hugged me carefully, said she was glad I was okay, made a comment about how skinny I looked. Normal things. I smiled and said the right words and went inside and sat down on the couch in the guest room and stared at the wall for a long time. That night, I couldn't sleep. My ribs ached and the painkillers they'd sent me home with made my thoughts feel like they were wrapped in cotton. I got up around 2 in the morning to get a glass of water and I heard them talking in the kitchen. The door was half open. I wasn't trying to listen. I want to be clear about that, I was not trying to listen. But when you hear your own name in a voice that doesn't know you're standing 6 feet away, something in your nervous system stops you cold. My brother said, "He's not going to be happy." His wife said, "He doesn't have a choice. It's already done. He's going to ask about the money." Then we tell him what we agreed. Split after taxes. Split after the broker fee, that's what we put in the paperwork. A pause. The sound of something being set down on the counter. "And the equipment?" my brother asked. "Goes with the property." That was always part of the deal. The lift, the tools, all of it. Dad's tools. She didn't respond to that. Then she said, Caleb was never going to be able to run it alone anyway. You know that. Especially now. With his arm. This was the practical decision. Yeah, my brother said. Not agreement, exactly. Something flatter than that. I stood in the hallway with cold feet on the hardwood floor and the glass of water forgotten in my good hand, and I felt something shift inside my chest that had nothing to do with my cracked ribs. I went back to the guest room. I didn't sleep at all. In the morning, I said nothing. I ate the eggs his wife made, drank the coffee, listened to my brother talk about the weather. I watched his face while he talked and tried to find something in it. I recognized. He looked the same as he always had, square jaw. Dad's forehead, the same way of rubbing the back of his neck when he was mildly uncomfortable. He was mildly uncomfortable through the entire breakfast. After he left for work, I borrowed his wife's car and drove to Merritt Sons. The sign was still up. That was the first thing I noticed, the original sign my father had painted himself in 1997, dark green letters on white, slightly faded at the edges, the ampersand a little uneven because he'd done it freehand. It was still there. But taped to the inside of the front window was a piece of paper I had to get out of the car to read clearly. A printed document with a broker's letterhead. Property under contract. Pending sale. A name I didn't recognize. I stood on the cracked asphalt of my father's parking lot and read it twice. Then I called the one person I knew would answer at 8:15 on a Thursday morning without asking questions first. His name was Dennis Park, and he'd been managing the shop's day-to-day operations for 4 years. He answered on the second ring. "Caleb," he said. "You're out." "I'm standing in front of the shop," I said. "Tell me what happened." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How much do you know?" "Not enough." "Start from the beginning." He told me that 8 days ago, 3 days after I was admitted, my brother had come to the shop with a woman from a commercial real estate office. He told Dennis and the 2 part-time guys that there was going to be a transition, that the estate was being settled, that the business would be closing. He showed Dennis a document. Dennis didn't understand all of it, but he saw my father's name on it and a signature at the bottom. He said it looked like my father's signature. He said it had my brother's signature beneath it. And a notary stamp. What document? I asked. Dennis described it a co-ownership amendment. Something that retroactively listed my brother as a 50% owner of the business and the property, signed allegedly 6 months before my father died. I gripped the phone tighter. My father never mentioned that to me. I know, Dennis said. That's why I kept a copy. I went still. The Ohio wind pushed a plastic bag across the parking lot. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking. You kept a copy, I said. I've been running this shop for 4 years, Dennis said. Your dad trusted me. I didn't like the way any of it felt. So when your brother wasn't looking, I photographed every page on my phone. I've got it all. I sat down on the hood of the borrowed car. My ribs ached. I didn't notice. That afternoon, from the guest room of my brother's house, I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Lowell, and she'd handled my father's estate documents when he first drew them up 5 years ago. She remembered my father. When I told her what I'd found out, she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "Don't touch anything in that shop. Don't sign anything. Don't have this conversation with your brother yet. Can you get me everything Dennis has?" I said yes. "Caleb," she said, "if that co-ownership amendment was forged, this isn't just a property dispute. That's fraud. Potentially criminal." I didn't sleep that night either, but for different reasons. The next 3 days were the strangest I've ever lived through. I sat across the dinner table from my brother every night and talked about nothing and watched his face and thought about what my father would say if he knew. My father, who had built that shop with a $12,000 loan and a second-hand hydraulic lift and 20 years of 6-day weeks. My father, who had told me once sitting at a workbench with a cup of gas station coffee that a man's name meant more than his bank account. Who used to say the only thing worth passing down was integrity. Because everything else could be taken. I thought about that a lot in those 3 days. I also thought about what I'd overheard. It's already done. The matter-of-fact certainty in my sister-in-law's voice. Not guilt. Not hesitation. Just logistics. I had Dennis send me the photographs. Patricia examined them and called me back within 24 hours. The notary stamp, she said, was from a notary whose license had been suspended 8 months before the document was dated. The signature matched my father's general style, but there were inconsistencies she wanted a forensic examiner to look at. She had already contacted one. "This is moving quickly," she said. "It needs to," I said. "The sale is still pending. We can file for an injunction to halt the sale while the documents are under investigation. But I need you to understand, once we file, this becomes a matter of public record. Your brother will know." I looked at the guest room ceiling. Outside, I could hear my sister-in-law on the phone, laughing about something. "File it," I said. The injunction was filed on a Friday morning. By noon, I had received 4 missed calls from my brother. I let them go to voicemail. His wife texted me twice. The first message said, "Call him back." The second said, "You're making a mistake." I put my phone face down on the workbench in the shop, where Dennis had let me sit in the back office while all of this unfolded, and I didn't respond to either one. Dennis had kept the shop running quietly. On reduced hours because the 2 part-timers needed the income and because he was, as he put it, not going to let the place die over paperwork. I sat in my father's office chair and looked at the walls. My father had pinned things everywhere over the years, a photograph from when my brother and I were kids, maybe 7 and 9, both of us holding wrenches and grinning like we'd just solved something important. A certificate from the Chamber of Commerce, 2011. A handwritten note from a customer whose car he'd fixed for free after she'd lost her job. He'd never mentioned that note to me. I found it by accident. I understood, sitting there, that my father had kept entire rooms inside himself that he never showed anyone. And I understood that the shop wasn't just a building or an asset in an estate portfolio. It was every version of him I'd never gotten to see. That evening, my brother came to the shop. He pulled up in his truck and came through the side door and stood in the entrance of the office for a moment before he spoke. He looked tired. He also looked, for the first time in days, like someone carrying something heavy. "You didn't have to do this," he said. I turned the office chair to face him. I didn't stand up. "Do what, exactly?" "File papers. Make it a legal thing. We could have talked. We had dinner 3 nights in a row," I said. "You didn't bring it up once." He looked at the floor. The shop smelled like oil and metal and old coffee from the pot Dennis had brewed that morning. "Some things don't change. The plan was to split it," he said. "That was always the plan. Sell it, split the money, pay off what we both owe. You were in the hospital, I was trying to handle the estate. With a document that was notarized by someone whose license was suspended," I said, by a notary who was legally prohibited from certifying anything when that signature was supposedly witnessed. He didn't answer right away. And Dad, I said. He never told me he made you a co-owner. Not once. He talked to me about this shop 3 or 4 times a week for the last 5 years. He never said your name in the same sentence as co-ownership. Not once. He meant to tell you. Where's the original will then? Patricia has the copy he filed with her in 2019. Your name is listed as a beneficiary for a 1/3 share of the liquid assets. Mine is listed the same. The property, the shop, the building, the land is listed under my name. Solely. My brother sat down on the metal stool beside the door. He put his elbows on his knees and looked at his hands. They were softer than mine. He'd gone into finance at 24, left Clarkston, built a life in Columbus. He came back for holidays. He didn't smell like motor oil anymore. She handled the paperwork, he finally said. I looked at him. The document. The amendment. She found someone, she handled it. She said it was just correcting something Dad would have done anyway. That it wasn't fair you got the property alone when I was the one managing the estate after he died. He shook his head slowly. I signed where she told me to sign. I didn't ask enough questions. The shop was very quiet. The hydraulic lift my father had replaced in 2018 stood in the far bay, still and mechanical and indifferent to all of it. You knew the document was wrong, I said. Not a question. I knew it wasn't. Exactly right. That's the same thing. He didn't argue with that. I leaned forward in the chair. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Patricia is seeking to nullify the amendment as fraudulent. She'll succeed. The forensic examiner has already found inconsistencies in the signature that she believes are sufficient to challenge it. The notary issue alone may be enough. Once it's nullified, the original will stand. I am the sole owner of this property. My brother nodded slowly, like a man absorbing a diagnosis. The buyers, I said. Who are they? Commercial developer. Strip mall, they want the land. I thought about my father's sign in the window. His handwritten ampersand. 27 years of customers and engine grease and business cards stacked in a plastic holder by the register. The sale won't go through, I said. I'm not selling. My brother looked up. Caleb? I'm not selling, I said again. Calm. Final. Dennis has been running this place loyally for 4 years. The 2 part-timers depend on the income. Dad built this with his hands. I'm not turning it into a parking lot for a strip mall because someone wanted a shortcut through an estate. He was quiet for a long time. Then, quietly, what about me? After all this? I thought about the photograph on the wall behind me, the 2 of us at 7 and 9, wrenches in hand, grinning. I thought about my father in the middle of that frame, just out of the shot, almost certainly the one who took the picture. That's not something I can answer tonight, I said. He stood. He didn't say anything else. He walked to the side door and paused with his hand on the frame, and I thought for a moment he was going to turn around. He didn't. The door swung shut behind him and the latch clicked and the shop went quiet again. What happened after that moved faster than I expected, and slower than I wanted, the way legal things do. The forensic examiner's report came back confirming what Patricia had suspected. The signature on the co-ownership amendment bore several characteristics inconsistent with my father's verified signatures across other documents, spacing irregularities, pressure variation, a specific way he crossed his letters that wasn't replicated correctly. Combined with the suspended notary, Patricia filed a formal fraud complaint with the county. My sister-in-law hired a lawyer. For about 2 weeks it seemed like everything was going to become very expensive and very ugly. Then something shifted. Her lawyer apparently advised her, in plain terms, that the evidence was not in her favor and that proceeding to contest the complaint would expose her to greater liability, not less. She withdrew the counterclaim. She and my brother retained a mediator instead. Through the mediation, a settlement was reached. My brother formally acknowledged that the amendment was improperly obtained. He issued a written statement to that effect, which became part of the county record. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue him criminally, something Patricia advised me on carefully, and something I thought about for a long time before agreeing to. I'm not going to claim that decision was entirely without anger. It wasn't. But it was mine to make. And I made it for reasons that have more to do with my father than with my brother. My sister-in-law faced separate consequences through the fraud complaint. I'm not going to detail those here because some of it is still being processed, but I'll say that the attorney she hired is very busy these days. The sale to the developer was canceled. The pending contract notice came down from the window on a Tuesday morning, and Dennis peeled the tape off himself, carefully, so as not to damage the glass. I took over full operational management of Merritt Sons 3 weeks after I got out of the hospital. My wrist was still in a brace. Dennis stayed on, he'd never actually planned to leave. he told me. He'd just been waiting to see how things landed. The 2 part-timers came back to full hours. We took on a 4th person in April, a kid named Theo who's 22 and reminds me of myself at that age in ways that are mostly good and occasionally alarming. There's something I keep coming back to. In my father's desk, the same desk I now sit at every morning, I found a notepad in the bottom drawer. It was one of those yellow legal pads, and most of it was ordinary. Phone numbers, supply orders, a rough sketch of a lift configuration he was planning. But on the last written page, near the bottom, in his handwriting, "The shop stays with the one who stayed." 6 words. No date. No context. He never said that to me. Not in those words. But I think he knew what he was saying, and I think he knew who he was saying it about, and I think he wrote it down in the way that certain people quiet, certain people leave things behind. Not as instruction, as confirmation. I framed it. It hangs next to the Chamber of Commerce certificate and the customer's handwritten note and the photograph of 2 kids with wrenches, grinning at something just outside the frame. Some mornings I come in early, before Dennis and Theo arrive, before the first customer of the day, and I make coffee in the same pot my father used and sit in his chair and listen to the building settle around me. It's not a dramatic feeling. It's not triumph. It's something quieter than that, the specific stillness of a place that belongs to you not because you want it, but because you never stopped showing up for it. My father used to say a man's name meant more than his bank account. I used to think that was something fathers said. I understand now that he meant it the way he meant most things, practically. Without decoration, as a simple and operational truth. The sign is still on the front of the building. Merritt Sons. His handwriting. Slightly faded, the ampersand a little uneven, still there. I haven't changed a thing about it,